Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 12 of Bookmas. Today we're going to talk about 10 new authors that I discovered this year and that I feel like I've read enough of their books to say that they are probably going to be a new favorite or that I will continue exploring their books because I enjoyed the ones I read so much this year. There's not really any particular order to this. I will probably touch on my favorite authors that I had this year, new or old, in like a book tag video towards the end of the month, but these are just 10 that I'd never read a book from before this year and that I read quite a few of their books this year and I really enjoyed. First up, should be no surprise, is Kristen Cicerelli. If you know me, you know that I'm obsessed with Heartless Hunter, aka The Crimson Moth. I loved that book. I loved it so much that I went and looked at her backlist, and I read a book called Edgewood by her, which was a standalone fantasy, and I loved that book too. Not as much as Heartless Hunter, but still the world was just very fascinating, very fun, very unique. The story was great. I loved the characters, so I felt similar feelings, but not as much love for that book as I did for Heartless Hunter. And she has another trilogy that's out called The Last Namasara, I believe, which is on my like eventual TBR. I don't own the books. I'm not sure if they're on Kindle Unlimited. I have to look. I don't think they are, so I'll have to buy them, but I like her enough that I am obviously going to read Rebel Witch, which is the second in that duology, and I will probably try to pick up The Last Namasara at some point, hopefully in 2025 to start. Next is Miss Abby Jimenez. I had followed her as an author before because my sister had told me about her like Instagram videos and like all the fun stuff that she does with her family and her dogs, so I had followed her about that previous to reading her books. I read the one trilogy interconnected series that she has, which is Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and Just for the Summer. I have not read the first one. I do plan on reading that. It was on Kindle Unlimited. It is no longer, but my sister I think owns at least 2 of those books, so I will be able to read them. But I just loved her writing. I love that she tackles like difficult to discuss subjects and she handles them with such grace in her books, and her characters are just such wonderful demonstrations of like these, like, I want to say like disorders, but like OCD and anxiety and stuff. Like she had great anxiety rep in Yours Truly. I really connected with those characters because I was like both of them as one person. So the way that she writes things relatably but also very serious and very true, I really appreciated with her characters. And I loved that her stories did connect. Like if you've never read those books, do read them in order. I recommend you read them in order. I know Just for the Summer was like a big deal this year and everybody wants to read that one, but if you read Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and then Just for the Summer, you'll get a lot more out of that because they do connect in very significant ways if you read them in that order. So you don't have to, but I would recommend it. So I'll definitely be reading more of her books. She has Say You'll Remember Me coming out this year, and I have not pre-ordered it, but my sister has, so I'll be reading a copy of that when it comes out. Then another author that I just actually did a video about a few days ago you will have seen is Leigh Bardugo. I've read her entire backlist this year, starting with Shadow and Bone, all, 7 books in the Grishaverse? Yes. And then I also read her 3 adult novels, which are Ninth House, Hellbent, and The Familiar. And there should be a 3rd book in the Alex Stern series. It is going to be a trilogy, so I'm excited for that. But if you want more thoughts on her in full color, you can watch that video, which was a few days ago. But I really love her writing. She's probably one of my favorite authors now, and I can't truly say that because I have read her entire backlist, but I just couldn't get enough of her worlds and her characters and her stories and how they are fantasy heavy, but they still have a little bit of romance in them. I would not call them romantasy, but there's still that little aspect of it that keeps it interesting and makes you connect with the characters, I think, a little bit more. And I've loved every single one of her characters, loved all of her books. Highly recommend trying out her Grishaverse, even her adult series, if maybe that's not up your alley, but I loved reading all of her books this year. Then I have Tahara Mafi. I read the entire Shatter Me series this year, as well as the first 3 books in the This Woven Kingdom series. I don't know how many books that's going to be. I do know it's not done yet, but her worlds are so unique and her stories are so unique and her female characters are such strong, independent women that I couldn't get enough. I did not think I would like the This Woven Kingdom series as much as I do. It is just such a unique, fun storyline, and there's a little bit of a love triangle, which makes things interesting, and there's just enough like higher stakes things going on that keep it like moving quickly and just wanting to read and read and read them. So I am excited. I do not know when the next book is coming out, but I'm excited to see where that storyline goes. And then Shatter Me, I thoroughly enjoyed that series. It was such an easy read. I don't know why, but I read those books like I could read them in like 2-3 hours if I sat down. And I think it was just because it was easy to digest after you get through that first book and you have the world built up, and then you just don't want to put them down. They're short chapters. They move quick. They're like reading a Jennifer Lynn Barnes book. They just move so quickly, and the chapters are the perfect length that you're like, I can read one more. I can read one more. And then by the end of a few hours, you're done with the book. So I'm sure a lot of people have already read that series, but if you have not, probably pretty good books to get you out of a slump if you're okay with fantasy, dystopian worlds, because they just move so quickly, and it's like a good way to get a book like ticked off your list pretty quickly. Then I have a new thriller author to add to my list of favorite thriller authors, and it is the first male that has made the list, actually, because my other 4 favorite thriller authors are all female, and that is Riley Sager. I've read 5 of his books so far this year. I own 1 more, and I think there's 2 more that I don't own to read on his, and I do not know if he has any coming out this year, but I've thoroughly enjoyed his books. While none of them were 5-star reads. It is very hard for me to have a 5-star thriller. I'm not sure that I ever have. Some of them were 4.25s. I really think that he writes a twist in there that's nice, and he lets you get to know his characters a little bit more than some other authors do, and I think that's why I have the favorite authors that I do, and I want to say that 3 of them do a really good job at that, and that is Megan Miranda, Ruth Ware, and then now Riley Sager, and I think that's why I like him, because he reminds me of those 2 female authors, and they're 2 of my favorite thriller authors. They really let you get to know their characters, and they build up the character story, and they don't just throw all these people in there and you're just learning little things about them enough to get you through the story, which is kind of how Alice Feeney and Lucy Foley write, but that's fine because that's a little bit of a different type of thriller, and I still do really love their books too. But it's interesting to read his books too, because he writes them from the perspective of a woman. At least 4 out of 5 of the books have. I think the only one that hasn't, I'm looking at them if you see me looking this way, was Middle of the Night. That one was written from the perspective of a male, but I am 99% sure the rest of them were. So I've read The House Across the Lake, The Last Time I Lied, The Only One Left, and Final Girls by him. And I have enjoyed all of those, some more than others, but the stories are all very unique and different, and none of the twists are the same, so that is also kind of nice. But I also know that's not his real name. I saw that when I looked him up, which I didn't know, and I don't remember his real name. I know he's from Pennsylvania, but I can't remember what his actual name is, but that is his pen name. So, fun fact. And some more romance authors. Most of these are romance authors. Elsie Silver. I never read an Elsie Silver book until this year, and I have now read 7. The only series I haven't read by her is the Gold Rush Ranch series, and I plan on reading that next year, as well as continuing the Rose Hill series, because the next book in that comes out as well. But I thoroughly enjoyed the Chestnut Spring series, Heartless and Reckless. 2 of my favorite romance novels ever. I love both of those. Reckless a little bit higher, but Heartless surprised the crap out of me because I do not like single dad tropes, and that was what that was, and I loved Cade. Loved him, loved Willow, loved them as a couple, loved that story. So, A+ for her for getting me to like single dad tropes, which is great because that is what the entire Rose Hills series is, but I will automatically read anything that woman releases now, so. Good small town romances. I wouldn't say all cowboy romances, obviously. I think the Rose Hill's probably considered more of a single dad billionaire series, but definitely enjoy Chestnut Springs, and looking forward to reading Gold Rush Ranch, which is the prequel series, I guess you could call, to Chestnut Springs. Another author whose entire backlist I read this year, for the most part, all of her romance novels, because she does have novels from before that era of her writing journey that are like YA fantasy books, I believe, and that is Emily Henry. I read every single one of her romance novels this year. I have no idea how I would rank them up against each other now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe that's something I'll look more into. But I really loved Funny Story, and I really loved Book Lovers. Those are probably the 2 that stick out the most to me. But I liked all of them. I enjoyed all of them in their own way. Happy Place is actually, I would probably say, don't come for me for this, Happy Place is probably my least favorite out of all of them, and that's just because I didn't love the romance in that book. I liked the alternative storyline, which was basically like learning how to grow up, and you grow away from your friends and your lives change, and it's adapting to that and figuring out how to make your friendships work, or sometimes not. That part of it I really did like, but I did not like the romance in that book. So that's probably why it was my least favorite. But the rest of them were all wonderful. I just think that, again, she hits on harder things than just the romance. There's other underlying parts to the story that I think hit me harder than the actual romance did, and that's why I enjoy her books. But she has another one coming out too. Big Beautiful World, I want to say, is her next book. And that is coming out this coming year as well, I think in the spring. Again, I will not buy that one. My sister will, because I read all of her books. She has all the Emily Henry books, but it's so nice having a sister that reads because we can share books. I'm trying to get her into fantasy. So if you're a romance reader that maybe started reading fantasy, let me know what you started with. I have a few ideas that I've told her, but I know that's like a random tangent, but like let me know in the comments below what you think would be a good place to start her fantasy-wise. Then another romance author that I read entire backlist of this year is Ali Hazelwood, and she is definitely probably up there in my top romance authors. She writes feminist novels, which I love because I am an engineer full-time, and I love the fact that I'm getting to read about these like very like headstrong women in like male-dominated fields that I can relate to because that's my everyday life, but that also like don't take crap from these men, and they're also in there. I think that it's nice that they're kind of in the same type of a working situation. I don't know, I just really enjoy her feminist novels, but I also loved Bride and I loved Check and Mate. Those are my two favorites, without a doubt, which is weird because they're not the feminists. I would even say Not in Love is along the lines of a semi-feminist slash more, she called it an erotica novel, but they were both still in this like the STEM fields. The next one that she has coming out, Deep End, is going to be interesting because it will be a sports romance because it is about a diver and a swimmer. And I think it is also going to be more along the lines of spice level of Not in Love based on how the synopsis reads and it's just been described. But again, an auto by author for me, I will read all of her books without a doubt. So love that I found her this year. I actually knew about her last year. I just didn't get into her books until this year. And now that I've read enough of them, I truly think I can say she is one of my favorite authors. The last two are romance authors as well, but the first is Liz Tom Ford. I'm not sure if she has anything else outside of the Windy City series, but I ate those books up. I think she writes wonderful romances. She writes like the perfect men. Like nobody writes a man better than Liz Tom Ford. I don't care what anybody else says. Every single one of those guys. Even Xander, who I know a lot of people didn't like, I didn't love him, but I think he redeemed himself at the end, and I love him in the like subsequent books other than his because I think he's grown as a person and the way he treats Stevie is just wonderful. But Ryan Shea, no man will ever beat him. I loved Play Along too, and I loved Caught Up, but no male romance character will ever beat Ryan Shea. He's just perfect. She endeared me to herself with that one. I did end up listening to Mile High and The Right Move as audiobooks and then loved them so much that I bought them and then also Caught Up and Play Along, and I'm very excited for her next release, which is going to be Rio's book. Don't know what's going to be about other than it's Rio's. And that's all I need to know. And then finally, an author who I'm just about caught up with one of their series, and that is Chloe Walsh. And I put her on this list because I've only read one series by her, but same as Liz Tom Ford, and it was the Boys of Toman series. I've caught up with that. But I've been looking into her backlist as well, and she seems to write like very, I don't know how to describe it. Like I know that the other series that I'm like looking into one of them, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a 4-book series. All 4 books are about the same couple. And they're just difficult situations that these people get in, and all of the synopsis for it just seem like it is going to rip you apart because they're dealing with things that are real life things. Obviously, the characters have a little bit more baggage than maybe a normal person would, or like somebody in like my situation would going into a relationship, but it is heavy baggage, and the stuff that happens to them in these novels is crazy. I mean, Joey and Aoife, and then the things that happen to Gibbsy that you don't really find out until his book. The things that happened to Shannon. I wouldn't say Johnny necessarily, like he had some issues obviously, but the situations with like the Lynch family and like Gibbsy are completely different than I think the rest of the opposite characters in their books. But both of the characters in the one series that I was looking at reading next from her, I'm like, I gotta be prepared to read that book. So I do think I want to try another one of her series. I will probably only buy the first book just in case it's not something that I really like. But I think going into her books, you have to be prepared to go through some shit with these characters, and I appreciate that. Not everybody can be Lynn Painter, another author that I discovered this year that I really did enjoy, but she is a very like lighthearted, fluffy romance author, and I like those. They have a purpose, they have a time and a place, but at times I also do want like a deeper, more emotional read. And that is definitely Chloe Walsh, based on The Boys of Toman and based on the synopsis I read of another series. So I do look forward to reading more of hers. I don't know that I'd call her a favorite author yet, but she's definitely one that really interested me that I discovered this year. So that's why I wanted to include her on this list. Okay, so those are the 10 authors that I selected for this list. Obviously, I've tried some other authors this year that I did enjoy as well, but I don't feel like I read enough of their books to really form an opinion. Elle Kennedy's kind of another one. I do want to read a little bit more of her books because I'm still a little torn on that. I read the Off-Campus series. I do want to read the Briar U and the Campus Diary series because I did not love Avalon Bay. I have read 2 of the 3 of those books. They were okay. But I know my sister is just like flying through all her books. She may have read all of her backlist at this point and she's enjoying them. So I did want to put her on here, but because I didn't feel like I've read enough of her books out of how many she has, I wanted to hold off on that. But I did really enjoy reading the Elle Kennedy books that I read this year. So there's a little bonus author. But let me know below if you've discovered any new authors this year that you would feel comfortable maybe saying is a new favorite, or that you're definitely interested in reading more books from them. And let me know in the comments what authors you're looking forward to trying next year that maybe you haven't yet, that you have some books on your TBR for. And I thank you all so much for watching if you've made it this far, and hope to see you tomorrow for day 13 of Bookmas.